We have yet another episode being done today for the past podcast. If you're tuning in, I do appreciate it. If you'd like to check out any previous episodes, go to Spreaker.com/Brite Podcast. Nonetheless, let's continue the show. So true, I am about 2 days behind, but I guess we'll consider this as the halfway point of the month of April. What's going on, y'all? Past Podcast, back at it again. I'm your host, BT. I wanted to go ahead and take time and kind of do a bit of an update and a reflection just to kind of give everybody a little bit of a pulse check, because I know most of my podcasts have been pre-screened, pre-prepped, kind of give you all like a check-in as to how the podcast flow has been going since doing the podcast every day in April. I'll be the first to admit I didn't know if I would be able to do them. I know I did kind of cheat a little, and I ain't gonna say cheat, but kind of get a feel for working on these for the first few days and kind of having a few of them preset. And the preset episodes were good, and I loved and I enjoyed those. But now, since I kind of relinquished or used up all those opportunities of doing those, I've mainly made it my goal to just focus on actually producing and recording and posting content that is live and up to date as to what's going on. So I just wanted to, first and foremost, if you have been listening or been taking time to check out these podcasts, I do appreciate it. I have been kind of forgetting or misplacing my plugs. Like I said, I do use the Blue Yeti microphone. That link is in the description. And I also am a huge supporter of the Spreaker website for doing podcasting. Like I said, there are other sites and there are other offers that work for individuals with podcasting. And I know everyone finds their way of doing it, but we all trying to get to the same point, which is to produce and create good content for our listeners. And it's been a lot for me. I'll be the first to admit I've been in such a go mode. There were a couple of podcasts that I have queued that I listen to personally. I haven't even taken time to listen to them myself. So that's just been how the day or how days have kind of just stumbled and rumbled together. But nonetheless, it's been a good show. I've truly embraced and enjoyed what I have done so far. And like I said, there are plenty more coming. I know that many of you have mentioned a couple of topics. What I'm making sure that I do, because I know there was a stint where I kind of had topics queued in my head and I've had them written down, but kind of been all over the place. Well, I'll do this topic, then I'll do this topic. What I'm going to do is go ahead and list topics down and get those as kind of my solid set of topics for the second half of this podcast flow. So this podcast is, of course, will cover for today's daily podcast for April. And I'll be the first to admit, and I can say it too, because she's, my twin been doing her part too. Doing these has actually been different, but it's a good different, because like I said, I tell you all the time about the podcast that I listen to for Ashley Taylor with High Vibe Like What. Her podcast is a traditional daily podcast anyway. So I give major props. Like, I would be able, and it's not even that I would be able to do it, but I can't. It's not even any of that. It's just doing it in that manner and prepping in that regard daily. It's not that it can't be done. It's just a different flow and a different way of handling how to sit and do and go through an entire show, getting show notes, things of that sort. So I just wanted to at least get that out there and talk about it a little bit and let everyone know that we're at the halfway stage, close to the halfway stage, may as well say in the home stretch of doing these. And I've kind of got a few topics I still can do. I may get a little creative and throw a few more in. I do plan to have, I want to say this Thursday on the 20th, there will be a very, very weighted podcast coming. That's the best way I can describe it, because I really have a topic that I want to get into and jump on. But I wanted to, at least before I continued any further, kind of just hit that little, halfway point, bit of a relaxation, kind of a rest stop, pit stop, however you want to call it, rest area, to just say, hey, here's where we are, here's what we've done, here's what we have, here's what other things we have in store. And I just, hope you all continue to listen and just kind of keep an eye on what's coming down the pike, because I truly do know that I'm not getting tired of doing these. I just think I'm getting the adjustment of learning how to see how a daily podcast comes to full fruition, if that makes sense. So that's my best input or intake on that. But I really do hope you all continue listening, and I hope that these do touch you or reach in some small or simple manner, whether it's something that's making you think a little differently, or if there's a topic that you may have not thought about but was addressed in previous podcasts. Also, be sure, if you do check out my page, I do have 2 separate sets of podcasts that are showing. There is one page that goes to the weekly podcast, which those are my weekly sports podcasts that I always do. And then I have my podcast that I'm doing right now for every day in the month of April. In the next few weeks, hopefully a day, I'll take a day off or take an opportunity of shutting down. I do want to sit down and go back and get previous episodes that a lot of you may or may not have listened to, and add those to this podcast, so that way we kind of have one nucleus of all of the episodes that I've done. The only, I ain't gonna say it's a kink, but the only thing I wish, and I always say this, but of course, like anything, I digress, is that I really and honestly wish I could go back and get my first set of episodes when I really was getting started. Because when I first, and I'll tell this story anyway, this is a sidebar, but this will kind of tie into the podcast as a whole. When I first started doing podcasting, doing the podcast now every day in April, I was doing my episodes, kind of getting them prepped, getting them going, had a lot to discuss and talk about. But now, at that time when I really was getting the ball rolling, I truly will be the first to admit that I would honestly sit and say, oh, I'm going to do a podcast 3 days a week. I'm going to do sports on this day. I'm going to do video games on this day. I'm going to do music on this day. And I had a lot of content mentally queued up. But as I've heard in different podcaster stories, the worst thing you can do is have your podcast, I ain't going to say die, but become stale. And I didn't want to have a stale based brand. And I think doing my podcast how I've done them now has been helpful, because now it's more on my time, but it's also still giving you all good content. So that's what it's been about now more than before. Because at first it was, all right, I'm going to do a podcast. Let's put something up here and get something going. Instead of, all right, let me see what the listeners really want to hear, or what are they really looking for in a good show. So I will admit it's been a journey, but it's been a worthwhile ride that I don't mind taking whatsoever. So I just wanted to share that with everyone and just kind of make it clear that I really and truly do appreciate any time taken to listen to a podcast or listen to any of the episodes. Because without, like anything, with no listeners, there's no podcast. So that's what I want to state in regards to that. Stay tuned. More episodes coming. I will look over what I have written down as stories, because some I have and some I've thought of, and I'm like, oh, I'm not sure how I'm really going to do that topic, but that's down the road. And as always, keep tuning in, keep checking out what's coming, and thank you all for checking out the shows. Until next time, BT signing out with the Past Podcast. We have yet another episode being done today for the Past Podcast. If you're tuning in, I do appreciate it. If you'd like to check out any previous episodes, go to Spreaker.com/Brite Podcast. Nonetheless, let's continue the show.